All right, welcome to the Hope City Drip. This is a podcast where Ben and we are going to be talking about the mission and the vision of our local church here in Clinton, Iowa. And so whether you're a stay-at-home mom and you have littles running around, or whether you're a shift worker and you have long, weird commutes, we hope that this podcast is helpful for you to digest the mission, what we're about as a local church, making disciples, reaching the city, and really restoring and renewing Clinton. And so we hope that this podcast is helpful for you. So on this podcast in particular, we're going to talk about how we celebrate the gospel, how the gospel of Jesus is something that isn't just words in the Bible, but it's something that we actually believe and that we have joy in celebrating. This last weekend, we had baptism. We like broke away from the familiar rhythm of meeting in the building that we meet in, and we went up to Eagle Point Park, the North Pavilion. If you're familiar with that, it's just a hillside with a sweet, simple pavilion with some picnic tables under there, and a spigot that we filled our horse trough with, and then we dunked the dude. It was awesome. And so I had a good time, and I feel like those moments really highlight for me, I don't know about you, but they highlight, the tone that we're striving for in the Christian life, just together in community, partying together because of what Jesus did for us. Yeah. And so I don't know, what was your perspective on that and thinking through that?
It was cool. I think any baptism service I've ever been a part of are like a celebration. And it's like it's a glass case of emotion, because like you have...
What is that off of?
Anchorman.
Anchorman, yes.
Because you have like, you're probably joking a little bit, they were laughing, and then some dude sitting, or some person, male or female, is sitting in water. And that's just... They're kind of having an awkward time while they're getting talked about, and everyone's looking at them. So it's like a funny, happy occasion. And then like the woman I was sitting next to on Sunday for our baptism service is someone near and dear to my heart, and she was like crying because like it's just like it's a big deal. Like, and it shows the grace of God and like all these things, and it's like, and so you get all of the emotion spectrum. So it's like, I don't know, it's just cool. It's like
Is that a weird way to talk about your own heart? You were sitting next to a woman who was crying. Was that you on the inside? You were just like trying to like...
I was actually sitting by myself, like over in the corner. Yeah, there's a woman next to me, was crying.
But you said a funny comment earlier about baptism.
Well, we were talking about the way that we did our baptism service.
Oh, yeah.
And this isn't a rag against how other churches do baptism service. Right. There's not a...
But they're all worse than the way we did it.
Yeah, that's accurate. And I don't know, Red Rocks down in my church that I went to in Austin.
Yeah.
I don't know if they did it this year, but the first year they did baptisms, they went to a boat landing into the lake in April. But the water was cold, they said. Oh. But they like literally were out in the water, and like they had like I think 20 or some people baptized.
That's so cool.
They just walked out, like, and they had a camera guy, I think. Someone out in the water with like obviously like not getting the camera wet, but they have really dope production crew anyway. So like, the videos were cool.
He's holding his red Epic up in the air, and it's like this $50,000 camera. You can't get wet.
In a Ziploc bag.
But was it at Eagle Point Park?
No, it wasn't.
No,
that's for the point. But it was at like a pretty prominent place.
Oh, okay.
It's a close second.
Is it on the Red Rock?
No.
Oh, is there a Red Rock in Austin?
There is. No, because Red Rocks is out of Colorado.
Oh, is there a Red Rock in Colorado?
Well, there's Red Rocks Amphitheater. Zero tie to Red Rocks Church. I don't even think they've ever had a service there.
But is there an actual Red Rock?
I think it's just rocks that look red, like mountainside.
But are they red? I picture Colorado being blue, like a can of Keystone or something.
You're thinking Coors.
Coors. Gosh. Whatever. You know all the marketing they try to get us with. Cold as the Rockies. I picture everything being blue. There's red rocks up there?
There's some of the... We're getting way off track. If you're listening to the podcast right now, we will get to the gospel at some point. Thank you for sticking on with us.
podcast is brought to you by Tom Fuller.
I was just gonna what's our sponsor this week? Anyway, so our service, we normally do a normal church service for any other Sunday. You know, you go through liturgy, we do song, sermon, songs, fellowship.
Yeah.
You know, hour 15 service,
Maybe,
whatever.
yeah, that
whatever
sounds
we are.
right.
So this, for baptism, we did, I don't know, we did one song,
Yep.
did like a prayer. You did like a 3-minute sermon.
Yeah, it only took up 1 page.
3 to 5 minute sermon. And then a community prayer. I can't remember if we did songs before or after baptism.
We did a song after. We just sang Amazing Grace.
So then,
Yeah.
so we baptized. We had one person, so that's obviously not going to
Yep.
take as long. Baptized song,
Yep.
doxology, boom. So all in all, like 15 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, it could have been more than 20 minutes.
Yeah. And then we partied. We made more room for party.
Yep.
So I said...
And by party, you mean picnic.
Yes.
Picnic party. But
Picnic
not
party.
like a lame picnic where you're like, you are there for the Oreo dirt delight, you know, and then you like dip right afterwards.
Yeah.
We hung out.
No, we partied.
Yeah, we partied.
We had some bags tournaments. And
Yes.
as in there was 3 games of bags that were played. And
Total, yeah.
I may have won all 3.
You did not win all 3, did you?
I did.
Did you really?
Yes.
Wow.
And anyway, besides of that,
It was because your partner, not because of you.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I know she's going to listen to this, so I have to give her some credit.
Yes.
My partner was very...
She was draining
she was
those
on
bags.
the money.
Yeah.
We did a mullet of church services. We had the business in the front, but
That's
the
right.
longer party in the back. So anytime we
That's
do
what
it,
I'm talking about.
now our baptism services are called mullet church.
Okay, we need to remember this. From here on out, we have to remember this because this needs to be a thing.
And then our sign, when we do it, like when we get to a point where we have TV screens and we're doing announcements on those,
Right.
we have Jesus with a mullet.
Yeah, like Who Hot has that like white basic face. We need to have like, Jesus with a mullet face.
And that's our baptism sign.
Right. You know Hope City's going to have a baptism because you see that Jesus
And that's
mullet
the
sign.
shirts we give to people when they get baptized. is-
Don't stop.
Don't stop or you're fired. We just need to do podcasts when we're brainstorming for church because that's when our best ideas get
All
formed.
right, yeah, get the full focus out because
Yeah.
now we're going to start doing this thing.
All right, Michael Hyatt, where are you at? We need you to take notes.
So, unless you have something else to say.
I got one question to ask you.
Okay, go ahead.
What did you see?
What did I see? Oh, yeah, we were supposed to do that. Yeah. What do you see? What do we see? What do I see? Oh, okay. So I did write a blog about.
You did. It was very well done.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. It was about the census data that came out.
Well, I was going to say that one was well done, but
Oh,
your
it's a
letter to
different
the
one.
editor was good.
Yeah,
too.
the letter to the editor. So I wrote a recent blog today. It was really, I was just thinking through, a friend of mine shared with me a Des Moines Register article. And you got to be a member to read this article. So he ended up downloading it, sharing it with me. And the census data officially came out. Clinton lost 9% of its population from 2010 to 2020. And so in a span of 10 years, it went from, I don't know what 9% more of 24,000 is. But it went from whatever to 24,400 something.
Mhm.
So we have like 24,000 people here now. And it made a thing about it. It said in the article, it was like, the article was about Dallas County being it's like a western suburb of Des Moines Metro. And that county went from like 90,000 to like 100-some thousand or something like that. It was ridiculous. And so it experienced this huge boom in population. And then it went through all of the other counties and cities that experienced a ton of population growth. And it got to Clinton and it said, it was basically like this, wah, wah, wah. Like here is the fastest declining town in Iowa. And they said that we never recovered from the 2008 recession. And I said that to my parents and they're like, we never recovered since the 80s farm crisis. And then I was like, we never recovered from the Garden of Eden. For real, though.
Yeah. We never recovered from the lumber fall.
Yeah, the great fall of the lumber barons. Yeah. So here we are. And I'm like, well, yeah, this could be a whole conversation for a podcast. But my basic thing was that I was trying to raise awareness to for people, the 6 people that read my blog, they would have read, I I'm fond of the word reformer. I love the Reformation and the theology that came out of that era of church history. But the word reformer, G.K. Chesterton writes, it implies form. There's a shape that we're trying to conserve or get back to or get to. Like, so to have any sort of real progress, we have to have a vision for like what we're moving towards. And so I was thinking about, Clinton, and everybody talks about, oh man, what could have been and all what used to be and blah, blah, blah. Like everyone, like so many people are negative about Clinton. And that implies, well, if we're going to change something about this, we need to know what we're changing to, because we can't go back. We can't rewind the clock. And even if we could, like, we wouldn't want to go backwards. I mean, it's not like Clinton in its glory days was the New Jerusalem. It wasn't heaven on earth. And so from a Christian perspective, I think it's interesting to ask yourself, what vision of a city, like if you had all the keys to the kingdom, if the mayor came walking up to you and handed you the key to the city and you were able to do whatever you wanted, if it worked that way, what would you do? And what would you base your plans off of? What map in front of you or vision picture in front of you are you basing your work on? What are you looking off of? And I just think that's what we're all called to do as Christians, is we're called to go build and form and shape the world around us and labor for God's kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven. And so we're all in this great project as reformers. We're all reformers as Christians. If we care about changing the world at all, we're reformers. We're either reformers with good theology or reformers with bad theology. But we're all theologian reformers. And so anyways, I think it's interesting. So what did you see this week?
I actually just saw it on my way here.
Yeah.
Was coming in on the bypass, hit Main Avenue.
Are you talking about the house I'm trying to get you to buy? Never mind.
That as well. That was point 2.
Yeah.
Just kidding. But is that the intersection of the bypass and Main Avenue? I'm sorry if I'm getting this wrong. I believe it's like a 9/11 memorial or something there.
Oh.
And now they're putting that like blacktop.
Yeah.
I don't know but
I think it is.
But it was the new blacktop patch was full of cars, and they were like over cleaning that area.
Really?
And it was a lot of older people, and it was really cool to see. It's just out caring for the community and like making that area beautiful. I'm sure they're all in the same purpose or committee or something, but it was really cool to see. I really enjoyed seeing that.
That's sweet.
It was motivating.
Yes, because it was like actual action someone was taking and had a positive impact.
Because it made me think, it made me think of the purpose for, because I take that bypass route a lot coming up to here, so I see that blacktop patch, I'm like, what are they doing? Like, what are they building
What
here?
are they doing?
What are you doing?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, are they building it so people can park there and walk to the memorial?
Yeah.
And like interact.
Yeah.
And these people were taking time, I'm getting putting a lot of money on it. They're not getting paid to go beautify this area. And they cared enough about it to do it.
Yeah, that's sweet. So let me ask you this then. In just a couple sentences, why should we care about that as Christians? Like that specific act? Like caring about a memorial in Clinton? Specifically that, because memorials are vague, because it depends on the memorial. Let's just assume it was a 9/11 memorial. Why should we care about that as Christians?
The biggest thing I have, and this is like kind of a blanket write-off, when I think of like steward, like I think of being a steward of the earth. So I think of like, and you can get like mowing the grass and putting chemicals on it isn't stewarding the earth, but like I think just that's like the biggest thing. We're just like taking care of and like beautifying God's creation,
right?
And just making being a good steward, I guess, and like having a good heart and intention behind that. Right. That's like the first thing I think of. What do you think of?
Well, okay, if it's a 9/11 memorial, I think number one, there was human beings that died in that, and every life has value. Yeah, and it was a horrific event, and so it really took a blow to human dignity, and so we should remember that in order to pray for those who experienced similar suffering, and for the families that continue to experience fallout from that event. I also think that there is a sense in which, well, this is relevant with the Afghanistan stuff going on right now, is that the government, like under King Jesus, the government is ordained by God to restrain evil. And so every war memorial, in my opinion, like no war is perfectly just. It just doesn't exist like a perfect war. Like it's an oxymoron. Mm-hmm. And so there is a sense, though, in which that people who sign up to fight, like they're thrust into these places, these combats, that there are real human beings that they're able to save. Mm-hmm. There's like the role of government itself, having a stable government, having a military that's able to defend a government so that it stays stable is so essential for human flourishing. Yeah. And so, without getting into a bunch of politics on like whether we should be in Afghanistan or not be in Afghanistan, all that stuff, I think in general, government and military, having a military and recognizing those troops as doing a good thing for society and for culture, I think is worth remembering. Their sacrifice.
I was just thinking of something kind of along that lines, but earlier today I was driving and I was thinking about the Afghanistan stuff, and I was trying to think of like Taliban and Al Qaeda, and I was trying to think of like who they are, what they stand for, and all that stuff, and I couldn't think of it. And I'm like, how amazing is it that I am in America, a free country, protected borders, and granted, you can talk even more about being in small town Iowa, that I don't have to know what that is. That doesn't affect my life.
Right.
And I don't say that to like be arrogant, but I'm saying like we are beyond blessed.
Right.
And like it just made me really respect like military people and like our soldiers, and the fact that like we have people that protected that for us and fought for us.
Right.
Like, and I was thanking God for it. I was like, this is, I pray this for everyone. I wish, this in every country, that they had that same thing, that they didn't have to worry about invasion from a whatever demonic force of terrorists.
Yeah, I mean, a stable government that has peace and prosperity for its people is a miracle. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you look at human history, I mean, there's like most of human history is tribal warfare. And so getting to where we're at now, it's a miracle to have so many nations that are at peace and providing prosperity for them. And not that everyone has prosperity. I mean, I know that there are people that still suffer, but it's a miracle that we're not at constant war with our neighboring nations, Mm-hmm. Man, this could be a whole nother podcast on the role of government and all that kind of stuff.
We started up here and we're just flying down the rails.
So I just want to read a little section of scripture, because go back to our value of gospel celebration. Like we want to, like the gospel is the center of everything that we're doing. The finished work of Christ, we want to proclaim that as like the main thing. And making disciples is the main thing. And so when you talk about the gospel, I think it's helpful to talk about, what comes with the gospel. The gospel, when you speak it, doesn't just exist on its own. It comes from a person's mouth. It comes from an attitude. It comes from a community. And so there is like people who don't know Jesus interpret the gospel based on who it's coming from in a lot of respects. God uses the you've heard the expression, the medium is the message. Mm-hmm. The form in which the message takes is the message itself. And I think that analogy breaks down some places, but I think it's helpful to think through, like, for example, if someone says, if I'm going to preach you the gospel of North End Dairy Treat up here in the North End, and I say, the ice cream is pretty good. You'd be like, really? Like, you don't seem very pumped about it. Mm. Well, if I said that about Jesus, like, please, you can come to church. You can come to church with my church if you want. And it's like, no, I'm not going there. Your church, if that's how your attitude is about it. Mm-hmm. But if we're like, dude, Jesus is the best person ever. Like his work on the cross gave me new life, and I have new life. And come on. Come see us.
Have you ever had raspberry ice cream at North End Dairy Treat? Jesus is way better. Come on.
That's what I'm talking about. So let me read this familiar passage in Acts And it gives us a snapshot of the community that the gospel is coming out of. It's like soil of the gospel that's coming out of, and God blesses it. He says, and they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. This is the early church. Devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and prayers. And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food, and zoom in here, with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all people. And the Lord added to their number, day by day, those who were being saved. So, I mean, simply put, we get a snapshot of a community that is really close, really loves one another, and they have joy. And that soil there, that community, the gospel goes out of that community and multiplies. Mm-hmm. And so at Hope City, I mean, I want to be a community that is like that. Mm-hmm. I want to be a community that, like, when people interact with our people, they're like, there's something different about these folks. And so I don't know if, what do you think about that? Like, you've experienced that certainly, and maybe not, like, our church hasn't been around very long, and so we're still doing some of the heavy lifting to kind of establish the culture, but, like, have you been a part of friend groups or cultures or whatever that seem to just radiate the joy of Jesus?
Sorry, I'm not hesitating to, like, think of that. I had a thought process.
Yeah.
Like, I had a thought that I was going to say, and now, like, that doesn't apply here. So I'm like, I really have to change my, like,
changing your gears. We can go back to the thought and then jump back over to what we were talking about.
The way you're talking about changing the culture and stuff was, it's not necessarily being a culture of Jesus, but when I was in high school, I think we even had shirts for it. So we were like, our class was really good at sports.
Okay.
Humble brag.
Okay.
I had nothing to do with it.
What you really meant to say was, I was pretty good at sports.
No, I was not. I wanted on record, I was not. And
you're probably okay.
Anyways, we had a thing, like, the coaches always told us we needed to change the culture. And we had some quote on the back of, like, one of the shirts, I think, for lifting.
They were saying stuff like that when I was a senior.
But it was just like, because there was this, it's the Clinton culture of, we suck, blah, 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 just kind of make it through. And it's like, no, we got to change that. Right. And we did. Right. We did. I mean, hopefully it lasted. I don't know. I'm not around the high school anymore, but that's when I think of when you said reform. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of sacrifice to not be, you're kind of motivated in that sense. We were motivated by what not to be.
Right.
But it takes a lot of work to, like, show up and be consistent and do the right things. I think that goes for anything when you're trying to change any sort of culture.
I agree. There's a section in here. It talks about how, well, we know that as Christians, the Spirit of God fills us. And that's the source of our joy. In John, the Gospel of John, he says that those followers of Jesus that abide in Jesus, like, in your abiding, in the obedience, like when you're attached to the vine, when you're living in relationship to Jesus, his Spirit fills us and fills us with joy, the fullness of joy. And that, I feel like, is different from a football team. Mm-hmm. I think oftentimes about the ways in which Christianity is distinct. Because there's cool things we can praise about, like the football team, or even, I have conversations with people that are like, yeah, let's just be positive about Clinton. Let's just be relentlessly positive. And it's like, yeah, I get that. But what's your source of positivity? Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, unfounded optimism is just insanity. You're walking around. It'd be like somebody walking around their burning house being like, it's totally fine. And then they go up in flames. It's like, it just doesn't work that way. But Christians, it's the other end. Like, it's like, we have a source of real hope that even though maybe on the outside things are burning down and crumbling, the inside is being renewed. Mm-hmm. Whereas the secular person who doesn't know Jesus doesn't have that hope. Mm-hmm. So they have flimsy positivity, whereas we have, like, robust joy.
So if I'm listening to this podcast and I'm not a follower of Jesus, and I'm like, okay, Mr. Nick, if you are talking about this joy stuff a lot, so you want to restore downtown Clinton, all these old crumbly buildings, Where does Jesus? Why does your joy from Jesus
Turn them all into churches.
make? Get all the steeples.
Finish your thought. I was rude there.
Yeah, that's doesn't matter. That worked.
Okay.
Right there. But what joy? Your joy from Jesus. How does that motivate you to want to restore Clinton?
Motivate 'em. Yeah.
Why does your joy propel you to do
Well, okay, so I mean, Christ is king over everything. I mean, we sing, you know that benediction we sing, all things?
that? Mm-hmm.
That's from Colossians, where he is, he's reconciling all things to himself. There it is. So Christ the king, he's preeminent over everything. This is Colossians 1. He's king over the universe, not just the church, not just over individual Christians' hearts, not just a spiritual realm and nothing else. He's king over everything. And it says, for in him all the fullness of God, this is Jesus, in Jesus was all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things. So reconciliation is like making right all things. So all things being downtown buildings as well as human souls, I believe. Whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. So there's this sense in which if a Christian is redeemed by the blood of Jesus, so that's first and foremost what reconciliation has to happen. So if someone's listening to this who's a non-believer, I would first say, hey, God's desires for you, you're more important than buildings. Your soul is eternal. You were made to be in relationship with God, and that building is not made to be in relationship with God in that way. And so your soul needs to be reconciled to God. So repent, turn from your sin, follow Jesus, and you will be led into eternal life. Now, God then opens up the doors of possibilities for purpose. And now he's saying, go and be, elsewhere in the Bible, Paul says that we're ambassadors. We're like taking with us that mission of reconciliation. And we know that God made the world good. So I can say with a straight face, all the stuff around here, buildings, water, the river, the grass, the trees, all that stuff is good because God made it good. And so anything that's fudged up and mucked up from bad work or pollution or anything is sinful. It's a product of the fall. It was never intended to be that way. So if there's decaying downtown buildings, my desire is for those buildings to be used for economic activity, because good, profitable economic activity lifts the whole city. It helps us feed our people. Our families can have a flourishing life, and can be housing. If there's houses, apartments that go above or whatever. So those where people can live, safe places for people to live. And so, seeking the welfare of the city is not just a spirit. And this is, let me pick on Baptists a little bit. I'm a Baptist. I grew up Baptist. I would still consider myself a Baptist, even though I love Reformed theology. But Baptist, typical culture of a Baptist person is sort of escapism and retreatism, is to say, oh, the world's really messed up, but God's going to come rapture us out of it as long as we sit around and read our Bibles enough and share the gospel with people. And so there's this sort of aloofness that a lot of Baptists have to participating in more like non-spiritual stuff. But whereas this is where the Reformed tradition is a little more robust. So like John Calvin and Abraham Kuyper and some of these other guys, they would say, actually, Christ is king over all. Christ is king over everything, so it is his desire for all things to be brought into reconciliation to the king, including apartment buildings, your house, streets, things like that. So I think it's cool. There's a buddy of mine who's fond of saying that your theology comes out through your fingertips. And I really like that.
I dig that.
Luther said stuff like that too. Somebody asked him, like, what is a shoemaker? How does he do Christian work? And he says, make good shoes. That's Christian work. And I find that to be really cool, because we're not saying don't share the gospel at the expense of fixing buildings.
Yeah.
We're saying both. Share the gospel and fix these old buildings. And I think only Christians have a robust worldview to actually make a compelling case why that all fits underneath one umbrella. So I don't know if any of that, I feel like I was rambling.
I like it.
Okay. Where are we going with that? I mean,
this whole podcast is kind of odd. It's just
It's
all
good.
over the place. We could have just done a Q&A Facebook Live.
Right.
Right in the comments what
We
you
should
think we
do
should
that.
talk about next.
We should do that next week. I mean,
Who
this
do you
is-
think would join?
I don't know.
We need to really market this podcast.
Cal
then.
and Kate would join, I think.
Oh, yeah. I was going to give Cal a shout out. He said probably one of the nicest things to us about our podcast.
Did he?
He said we're a hoot.
Yes.
Made my day. Absolutely.
5-star review.
400 billion% serious made my day.
That's awesome. You're a hoot. Well, my whole agenda with this is that I want to urge us as a church and urge anyone listening, especially just if you're living in Clinton, that if you're a Christian, then you're cultivating a culture.
Mhm.
And like at Hope City, I want us to cultivate a culture of celebration.
Yeah.
And that celebration is rooted in the good news of Jesus. So it's something we can point to and say, hey, despite even our best efforts at rebuilding something that may crumble, like this house that we're in, I love my house that we bought. It's old and I want to restore it, all that. But, you know, derecho could come through and blow my roof off and then it's done
Mhm.
or whatever. But the gospel is eternal. Like the work of Christ, it is finished and there's nothing I could say or do that changed that. So I could point to that and say, that's where my hope rests, not in this other stuff. And that it should be a cause for us to celebrate.
Well, and I think it's really cool, too. We've been talking for a half hour.
Mm-hmm.
All over the map of
Mhm.
the topics that we talked about. But they're joyful things that we're talking about. We're
Right.
not like spending a half hour ragging on things. Like,
Right.
it's all because of Christ.
That's
Like,
right.
that we're doing this. Like,
Now that's a
all
hoop.
yeah, that is a
That's
hoop.
what I'm talking about.
Like, I don't know. It's just, if it wasn't for Christ, we wouldn't be sitting here. We wouldn't
Right.
have anything to talk about on this podcast. We wouldn't be having things to brag about on this podcast.
Right. We'd
I
just
don't
be
know,
a
it's just-
do-gooder
yeah.
social club.
Yeah.
And all those do-gooder social clubs are closing their doors.
So
Because
I just think it's cool. Like I'm in my head because I'm organizational and OCD. I'm thinking of what's our comment section, like our tagline, going to be for this podcast? Because there's no subject. It's just all over the place. But I'm like, I don't care. It's fun. Like we
Yeah.
just talked about a whole bunch of things and just were able to connect it all back to Christ and joy. Like,
yeah. I think creating culture.
Swish.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it. This is a good half hour. Something
Yeah.
to chew on. This gives us fodder, I think, for next week. We could talk about one of these little topics one of these paragraphs we could pick out and say, this is what we could talk about next week, maybe.
Comment on the Facebook or YouTube what you think we should talk about next week.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. Cool.
If we get one comment, that'd be a win.
Okay, we're
I
relying
was
on
like,
you.
hey, where you at?
Cool. So, yeah, we just hope that whether you're a member of Hope City Church or if you're someone who's just listening, looking in, and looking to be encouraged, we hope that this podcast was helpful for you to live for the glory of Jesus and the joy of our local community.